Okay, you're already able to see my screen, correct?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah. So why don't you read, Ravi? Are you okay to read How to Love God?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, Jai Baba, go ahead.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. To love God in the most practical way is to love our fellow beings. If we feel for others in the same way as we feel for our own dear ones, we love God. If instead of seeing faults in others, we look within ourselves, we are loving God. If instead of robbing others, we rob ourselves to help others, we are loving God. If we suffer in the suffering of others and feel happy in the happiness of others, we are loving God. If instead of worrying over our own misfortunes, we think of ourselves more fortunate than many others, we are loving God. If we endure our lot with patience and contentment, accepting it as His will, we are loving God. If we understand and feel that the greatest act of devotion and worship to God is not to hurt or harm any of His beings, we are loving God. To love God as He ought to be loved, we must live for God and die for God, knowing that the goal of all life is to love God and find Him as our own self. Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai Baba.
Find Him as our innermost loving self and abide in that state. So that's all we need to do. But that can take you a few lifetimes, trust me. Anyway, so just to set the context for everybody, we were reading Listen Humanity. We finished we finished chapter 2, and we're starting with chapter 3, which is titled The Toe of the Master. Right. So let's continue from that point. So I'm missing Mamaji. He had some inputs that he wanted to, I mean, at least he was talking about how he will reread and have some inputs, insights. So though it's a lighter read than normal, Baba's words are pretty profound, and he says quite a lot in the previous chapter. So the way the chapter is structured, the way the book is structured is there are 3 parts, and the first part focuses on the actual goings on in the Sahwas and the way and the messages that Baba gives, literally, word for word, right? So that's where I think Mamaji wanted to give some input, but I don't see him around. Anybody else? I know Sunil probably heard it over since yesterday. So Sunil, any thoughts? Any insights that you think that are relevant?
Not really. I think it's you just immerse in it. So I was not thinking, and he tells you not to think too much. Also, right? When you only love can save you through no amount of intellect and all that. So no special insights.
Sure. So if we have anything that we have to be that has to be discussed, we can take it up now, or we can jump to chapter 3. Yeah. Okay. So let's go to chapter 3. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Chapter 3, The Toe of the Master. As Baba came into the hall that second morning of the first week, or was it the second week, or the third, or the fourth, there were more garlands and insistent chorused shouts of Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. First, one cohesive knot would give the cheer, and 1 or 2 more garlands would would be placed about Baba's neck. Then another group in another section of the hall would chorus out like a cheering section at a football game, and more garlands would be hung. After this had continued for some minutes, and several slight diplomatic pressures on Baba's part had not served to quiet the enthusiasm, it became apparent that he had made up his mind to firm action. He raised both arms high in the air, and at once the hubbub subsided. Compared with the essentials for the path, the three most unimportant things are to garland me, to bow down to me, and to sing in my praise or perform an arti. These are not necessarily the signs of love for God. I know well that you garland me with love. This is a good idea when we first meet. But why do it every day? I have only 2 coats of the color pink I like most, and one is already spoiled by repeated garlanding. Do not waste any more time in garlanding me tomorrow. Let us not waste money, and let me not be burdened with garlands. Don't shout Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai every time I come in and go out of the hall. What is the use of that? Keep shouting, but do so within your hearts so that only you and not others may hear. Like abashed schoolboys, the group sat looking straight ahead, unwilling to catch a glance from the corner of a neighbor's eye. Momentarily, the air hung tense with the light reprimand, while Baba looked keenly over the hunched heads and forward-leaning shoulders. Did you sleep well last night? He asked. Yes, Baba, was the general reply. Who did not sleep last night? Slowly, one man stood up near the door, heavy brown scarf wrapped tightly about throat and head, eyes inflamed, nose running. His diagnosis was promptly read by almost 300 pairs of eyes. Another, and then another, then several rose to their feet. Why didn't you sleep last night? Because I was so happy to be near you again, Baba. But why didn't you sleep? My stomach was upset, Baba. I think I ate too much dinner because I was so glad to see all of my old friends again. And you? Some of the Parsis were playing cards and I couldn't sleep. I do not think they should play cards when they are here to learn of God from you. Baba was prompt with his reply. What has playing cards to do with one's love and longing for God? Playing with cards is better than playing with the whole of life. Shams Tabrizi and his famous disciple Maulana Rumi were both very fond of playing chess. Shams' greatest work was done at the end of a game of chess with Rumi. When Rumi lost the game, he could not help crying out to Shams, I have lost. Then and there, with the words, no, you have won, Shams gave Rumi instant God realization. But come now, Baba continued, as he again looked searchingly at the audience. Many of you look sleepy this morning. Once more, quite honestly, who all did not sleep last night? Under such persistent prodding, several others rose, among them a slender boy dressed in a white shirt and white shorts, and with an American-style crew cut. Why did you not sleep? There was a struggle for emotional control in the handsome face of the youngster, but finally he placed his hand over his eyes and wept. I could not, Baba, because all night I could not help remembering the happy times in the past when you used to stay at Dehradun. He choked out between his quiet sobs. Baba looked gently at him for a moment, and then turned his attention to another heavy-set, intelligent-looking fellow of middle age. And you, what kept you awake? I did not sleep because I was remembering you all the time, was the simple reply. Staring abstractedly over their heads, Baba seemed to be thinking momentarily about the various answers given to him. Then, recollecting himself, he motioned to them to sit down and without a moment's hesitation looked straight at a very thin fellow, perhaps in his early 20s, who sat just in front and to the right. Why do you look so pale and tired this morning? LH translated. I admit that I do not feel well and I did not get a good sleep, the pale one replied as he rose reluctantly to his feet. Why did you not rise to your feet when the others did? I'm a young man, Baba, and I did not want to complain like an old one. Baba shook his head. It is natural for all those who have bodies to develop ailments. Both young and old alike can catch colds. Youth in itself is no protection against disease. In exceptional cases, such as the one who becomes God conscious and does not return to normal consciousness, such a one remains naturally immune to contagion. But having come down to your level, even I can catch cold and become ill as naturally as you can. You must take proper treatment. And there's an asterisk. For more detailed discussion, see God Speaks, Meher Baba, Dodd Mead, and the pages are 228 to 29. Also, Appendix 2 of the present work, which I think we read, where he talks about illness for the masters, right, and how that works. So, again, we spent quite a lot of time understanding the nature of Avatar and how he actually comes down to the level and experiences the pain and suffering that human beings do. With that, I get back to the reading. Thereupon, the subject was dropped for that morning. Throughout the Sahvas weeks, however, the most enduring daily theme was the meticulous questioning of the groups and of individuals about how they felt and how they had slept. At first, one attributed this to extraordinary attention of an extraordinary man, but soon it became clear that Baba was concerned that careful attention be paid to health at all times. Part of the reason for this became apparent when Baba himself began to develop mild cold symptoms after having been in close contact for days with hundreds of coughing, sneezing men. Frequently, he would take advantage of a slight pause to clear his throat with a faint rasping noise, the only physical sound which he was heard to make. Even his hearty laughter was silent. How did this silence affect those about him? After a first jolt, the fact was lost under a towering mass of thought and feeling. Many have remarked on the extraordinary fact that after a few brief moments of surprise, one never misses speech with Baba. But he seemed to have an impish problem on his mind. He brightened, a flickering smile playing about his mouth, and looked towards the two doors of the hall, trying to find someone. At last, he gave up the search and began to gesture. In the basic spirit of my sahvas with you, what I now tell you, I tell as to members of one family. This morning, I had a tussle with Pendu in my room before I came to the hall. Pendu has been bearing the brunt of planning, executing, and maintaining the various arrangements necessary for the Sahvas program. Originally, it was decided to invite only 150 participants each week at a total estimated cost of 20,000 rupees and to spend an additional 10,000 rupees for the poor. I had agreed with Pendu not to allow any changes to be made in the original plan. But letters and telegrams soon began to pour in, and the number of participants began to swell as the appeals were irresistible. My lovers in Andhra have proved themselves real workers in my cause, My name has become a household word in many parts there. The same is true of those who love me and work for me in the Hamirpur area, where men, women, and children go about singing songs of love for me during their daily lives, whether in the fields or at home or going to school. But that will address the asterisks. I think it's just about, it's just the dollar value. All right. 20,000 rupees at that time was $4,500. 20,000 rupees today is probably $300. So that gives you some context between 1956 and where we are now. Okay, I continue. When the number 150 was initially increased to 200, there was a preliminary tussle between Pendu and me. At that time, he reduced the money to be spent on the 4 poor programs during the Savas month from 10,000 to only 5,000 rupees. Now the number of participants in each of the 3 remaining Savas groups is likely to exceed 200 and 250. In one case, the total may reach a figure of 300. Due to the increase, Pendu must, among other things, have the dormitory extended and obtain more cots. Pendu now refuses to be responsible for sparing more than 1,000 rupees for the poor. But see how things adjust themselves somehow. Nauja, who died and has come to me, has left 1,000 for the poor. I have also accepted 1,000 for the poor from the balance of funds which the Andhra Reception Committee had left from the Mass Darshan programs there. This brings the total to 3,000. Let us try to knock 1,000 more out of Pendu in order to complete 4,000 rupees for the 4 poor programs. Have someone fetch Pendu from the office so that we can put this matter convincingly before him. There's another reference about Mass Darshan. Mass Darshan means a spiritual blessing given by a glance or touch. Continue. A swarm of chatter arose from the audience as a messenger departed post haste from the hall and raced to the open office door at the end of the veranda. Almost immediately, Pendu appeared, a handkerchief muffled over his nose to prevent spreading of the heavy cold he had contracted just as the Sahwas programs were starting. You sent for me, Baba? He asked. Yes, Pendu. We have been discussing the money which is to be used for the 4 poor programs during the Sahwas month. I have endeavored to explain your difficulty in trying to keep aside enough for these poor programs, while every day more letters and telegrams pour in asking that the senders be allowed to come, Baba explained. Then he outlined further the amounts received from Nauja and the Andhra committee, pointing out the sum for the 4 weeks poor programs now total 3,000 rupees. Even in the misery of his cold, with Baba's intent look of urgency and scores of soft brown Indian eyes upon him, Pendu knew he hadn't a chance to resist the strategic nutcracker in which he was caught. Pendu, do you think that you could spare just 1,000 rupees more from your funds so we may have then 4,000 rupees for the 4 weeks, and that will be enough? Baba looked his persuasive best. It will be difficult, as you know, Baba, but if no additional persons are allowed to come, I will do it for you somehow, Pendu acquiesced. Pendu acquiesced for feeling that by this further sacrifice, he had at least won public recognition of the fact that the size of the groups couldn't be allowed to grow anymore. I'll take a pause here. I think any observations, any comments? I know it's a light read till now on chapter 3, but any comments, we can talk about it. I just had one comment to make, which is we have seen in all the interactions and stories of Baba the intense effort that he took to be human-like, right? With the infinite power and with the infinite knowledge that he has and the omniscience, he did not have to do any of the things that he had to do, right? So, but he always asked and sought information in a very, very human way to probably connect and be very real in the interaction with his lovers. So I think this is yet another example of that. What is a few thousand rupees and what is getting it done for his work? But then he had this elaborate way of getting this done and also almost sounding subservient to Pendu to get his approval in public and so on, right? It's amazing to see how he has come down to our level. That's one thing I wanted to say. Anybody else? Okay, so no comments. So we will continue and we'll see what Pendu does next. Thank you, Pendu. Baba smiled. The Marathi group is the last to come. If need be, I will give them such interesting discourses that they will feel well satisfied with the cheapest food for the week. I know the trick of it. Then he turned his gaze back from Pendu to the audience. When I tell you things like this, do not forget, as I often tell you, that under all circumstances, I always remain what I really am. Since, for all practical purposes, I am amongst you, I also remain practical about everything and take care of the most minute details. I have asked Pendu and Adi to send to all participants in my Sahvas a copy of the complete accounting of expenses taken from the 30,000 some odd rupees contributed towards the Sahvas weeks. With this, Baba rose and signaled that it was time for the mid-morning break. No game of 7 tiles was proposed this time. However, and in a few moments, the major part of the group had left the hall while Baba disappeared through a distant doorway. The day was already warm, and scarves and sweaters began to be peeled off, and the more usual light Indian dress came into display. Some of the sharp air of excitement had disappeared, and conversation was more normal, even slightly lethargic, as the participants rested in the assurance of 3½ days yet to come. A light drone of voices rose from the cluster of white stucco buildings, occasionally bejeweled by small metallic clangs ringing from the kitchens or the dormitories, or even from the belled oxen and the water buffalo in the surrounding country. Like waves on a seashore on a quiet sunny day, the peace of India lapped up on the white sand of men's souls and ran back again into the mother sea, abrading softly, polishing slowly, sometimes rising, sometimes receding, occasionally thundering in stormy insistence. Through all of the undertone of nature working in harmony with the ancient heritage of a land of spiritual values, there ran another theme of greater urgency. This was the personality of Meher Baba, which quickened the vital current and lent to it a sense that something of great importance was happening today. Come and look quickly and feel and open up your hearts and then think of what you have seen and felt. For, like the flash of lightning in the heavens, it may be gone in the next instant. An eddy formed in the peaceful buzz which could not be lost. There was motion somewhere, significant motion, and the shimmering pool of sound began to ripple and move back and forth between its shores to find the source of disturbance. As if drawn inevitably to its center, the viscous mass of Sahvasis began to flow back to the hall. As they stared in through the doorways, they saw the reason for their unconscious disturbance. Meher Baba was pacing back and forth with rapid, determined stride at one end of the hall. It was an interesting performance. It drew the curious onlookers like a lodestone, and yet made them self-conscious with the feeling that perhaps They were watching some private function to which they had no right. A few of the bravest slipped out of their sandals and slid in through the door, quiet and attentive, as if watching a ceremony of deepest significance. The others contented themselves with watching through the doorways, uncertain of the proprieties of the situation. At last, Baba finished. He loosened his light white coat and handed it to a waiting pair of hands. Clad now in his loose white sadra and his full white trousers, his face and skin glowed with a soft pinkness, having come just to the point of a light sweat. He sank down in his large armchair and relaxed. Some of you may be thinking that while engrossed externally in walking, Baba was engaged internally in his works on the spiritual planes. Actually, I was merely exercising to help my digestion and feel fresh. The great mystery was solved. As if by magic, the message seemed to be intuited everywhere that Baba was again in his seat and the doors were filled with the returning throng. One fine-looking student from the University of Pune went over to Baba's side and began a low, earnest discussion with him. It seemed that one of his university friends, a great admirer of Baba, but not one of those formally invited for the programs, had just arrived in his car and had asked for permission to remain over the weekend. Baba looked serious, no doubt caught in his own web of an earlier viewing, looking carefully around first to see if Pendu might be a witness to his iniquity. Baba finally raised his hands in resignation and nodded his acquiescence. The students slipped through the door and in a moment returned with a tall, lanky companion with camera and light meter hung around his neck. The two blended inconspicuously among those sitting back to the rear. Baba cleared his throat lightly. The audience quieted and the gesture started. Rest assured, I definitely know from my living experience that God is the one and only reality, and that all else is illusion. All that you see and hear at this moment, this hall, our being in each other's presence, these explanations which I give and you hear, and even my incarnation as the avatar, all this is a dream. Every night you go to sleep and have different kinds of dreams. Yet every morning you wake up to experience anew the same old dream that you have been dreaming since your birth into your present life in illusion. You will say, Baba, we are wide awake. We actually see you sitting before us. We can and do follow what you are explaining to us. But you will admit that you would say the same thing to me if in a dream you found that you were near me and heard me telling you that all you felt, saw, and heard was a dream. As long as you do not wake up from a dream, you are dream bound to feel it to be stark reality. A dream becomes a dream only when you wake up. Only then you tell others that the life you lived in the dream was just a dream. Good or bad, happy or unhappy, in reality, the dream is then recognized as having been absolutely nothing. Therefore, I repeat that although you're now sitting before me and hearing me, you're not really awake. You're actually sleeping and dreaming. I say this because I'm simultaneously awake in the real sense and yet dreaming with one and all, the dreams which all dream. There's an asterisk on sense, that is one with God. So let's see that again. So you're actually sleeping and dreaming. I say this because I'm simultaneously awake in the real sense. So that reference is to being one with God. I continue. All your pleasures and difficulties, your feelings of happiness and misery, your presence here and your listening to these explanations, all are nothing but a vacant dream on your part and mine. There is this one difference. I also consciously know the dream to be a dream while you feel that you are awake. When you really wake up, you will know at once that what you felt to be wakefulness was just dreaming. Then you will realize that you and I are and always have been one in reality. All else will then disappear, just as your ordinary dreams disappear on waking. Then they not only cease to exist, but they are found never to have really existed. From birth to death, you keep on growing. First you are young, then you grow old and die without knowing or caring from whence you came or whither you go. From who am I to I am God is just one long, long dream covering ages and ages in time. But this too is found never to have existed in the eternity and infinitude of your own existence at the moment you realize your real self or God. Every individual here and elsewhere is the same one, ever indivisible God. I say this because I'm responsible for the whole creation. We'll just see this is after responsible for the whole creation. The asterisk reads, and I read the footnote. It must be borne constantly in mind that once one grants the reality of God realization or union with God, it follows immediately that such a God realized individual would be speaking the simple truth when he said that all of creation flowed from him, that he was responsible for the whole of creation, and that all creation was one in him. This holds equally for the avatar, despite the presumably different mechanics lying back of his oneness with God. The ensuing statement, therefore, is a simple development of the logic of this essential fact of oneness. Good, appropriate footnote. I continue from that point.
I think Sanjay is waiting. He needs the link. He sent a message on Telegram. I'm not sure how to post the link on Telegram.
Okay, it's pinned actually. Just let me try to do that in a second. Give me 1 second. I'll just. Okay, I just posted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so let's continue from here. If I'm not here, then not only will you not be here, but the whole of creation with all its gross, subtle, and mental spheres will not be here. In short, everything exists because I exist. In your case, also the whole of creation exists because you exist. When you sleep soundly, then for you, everything, body, mind, world, and the universe vanishes and is absorbed in your sound sleep state, the most original beyond state of God. Then your consciousness, tired on focusing on the illusion of duality, is at rest within you. After being refreshed in the most original beyond state of God, your consciousness plunges you first into the dreams in sleep, and then you wake up once again within the dream of creation. This dream of creation emanates again and again from you and for you. This process of repetitive sleeping, dreaming, awakening is a result of your inability to wake up in your sound sleep state, that is conscious union with God. Therefore, alternately, you remain asleep or keep dreaming, either the dreams in sleep or dreams of creation. I'll pause here if anyone has any questions or thoughts. This is, as you said, the portions where he is offering discourses are pretty deep. So we can, pause and discuss anything that's important. I think the one thing to take away here is how he is distinguishing very clearly. I know we have heard this before. God speaks being the primary place where we read this in detail, and of course we have been discussing this multiple times. The difference between the dreams in sleep and the dreams of creation. So, and that explains the dream within a dream, right? So that's what we are here. And this whole thing itself is the dream of God. So in that sense, it's a vacant dream within a dream of which is within a dream of God, right? So that's something I thought of. Any thoughts from you, Kama? Any questions from anybody? Any comments? No. Okay, so let's continue.
Jai Baba.
Hi, Khalid. Jai Baba. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had an observation.
Mhm.
Baba says that, do not garland me or raise slogans against my name every time. The first time it is okay. I probably read this somewhere else also from Baba's literature. But yet, we in our way, we continue doing that. We continue with the Aarti. Even Baba has said, there is no need to perform Aarti for me. But, in our, whether it's our ignorance, it's our illusion, we still continue doing it. So my observation is our doing this is it a love for Baba, or are we being disobedient to Baba, or being in this gross form? We are living in the illusion even after Baba is trying to show us the light. So that was an observation. If anybody had any clarity on this, I would be happy to hear it. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Very good point, Khalid. Baba said, don't shout Avatar Meher Baba ki jai, no arti, all these things Baba said. But if you do them outwardly, that's what Baba meant. If we do that all outward display, they have no meaning. But the same thing, if we do it wholeheartedly, then the whole the paradigm changes to 180 degrees, all the way to the spiritual way. How we do that makes a big difference. Okay, if we don't do arti, if we don't have prayers, uh, let's say we started playing cards, or go to a bar, started drinking, what about those actions? Those also we do mechanically, right, for the self-satisfaction. If we do the same thing like a puja, Sachina Vratam, or go to mosque and do namaz while your mind is somewhere else, it doesn't matter. What matters is when you do anything, remembering Baba wholeheartedly with love is the only thing that matters. That is the message he is trying to give. Jai Baba.
Right after the passage that we have read here, this seems to be the fact to me that when you try to pray and then go through the regular prayer to Baba or any other way of prayer to God. We are trying to wake up from the dream that we are in. That is the process of trying to wake up into the reality from the dream that we are living in. That is how we have to look at that, I think. Jai Baba.
Interesting. So the prayer being a point of reminder, come actual connect with reality. That's a good way of looking at it. And of course, as Baba said in the previous paragraph, it happens unconsciously or without your memory every night when you actually go to deep sleep for however long it is. Right. So yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
I think it's
But
in
I
Beams,
think
right? There was a chapter talked about prayers. Baba did not encouraged us to do
it was B.
prayers.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. Mhm.
So I think we have said this in the past as well, right? A lot of what we see is contextual and not to be taken verbatim and for all contexts, right? So this reference to both the charms and the garlanding is very contextual to what is playing out in the Sahwas in 1956. And of course, it's not that he has not said this in other times. In fact, anything that degenerates to a ritual was something that he was obsessively against, right? And we see that in the way the trust manages things even today to make sure that nothing degenerates to a mere ritual, right? So the fact of how things are maintained in Mehrabad. So in that sense, I think garland, chant, everything, if it does not come from the heart, it's not working. And we can do anything at this realm, right? In the gross, subtle mental state that we are in, and in our current forms, whatever that gives us that confidence and comfort, and our hearts feel for it, I think we can do it. But then the recognition and awareness that it's not anything more important than the act itself is something that we should internalize. Okay. So if there are no other comments, I'll continue reading. So 38, first paragraph. It is only when you wake up in the true sense, that is in God realization, that you find that you alone, that is God, exist, and that all else is nothing. Only after cycles and cycles of time can one attain one's own conscious state of God, and find that one's infinite consciousness is eternally free of all illusion of duality. The whole of creation is a play of thoughts, the outcome of the mind. It is your own mind which binds you, and it is also the mind which is the means of your freedom. You are eternally free. You are not bound at all. But you cannot realize your freedom by merely hearing this from me, because your mind contrives to entangle you in the illusion of duality. Therefore, you only understand what I am telling you, and mere understanding cannot make you experience the truth which I tell you. For that truth, you must let your mind be halted and finally rooted out. Then, as soon as you see me as I really am, everything else will disappear, and you will find yourself to be your own eternal and infinite self. With this, Baba signified that it was time to halt for lunch. He instructed everyone to relax after the midday meal so that they might be refreshed for the afternoon. As he left the hall, Baba passed close to a thin middle-aged man dressed in the loose, ochre-colored robe worn by ascetics and known as a kafni. The unusual color caught his eye, and he seemed to think momentarily to penetrate through the robe to the man. "What is this? Why do you wear the kafni?" he asked. I put it on only for the occasion of the Sahwas program, Baba, was the reply. Baba speculated a moment, weighing the answer thoughtfully. We have to give the shape and color of detachment to our hearts and not merely to the clothes we wear, he suggested gently and strode on through the door. Lunch had hardly been eaten before a few stray persons returned to the hall. Among them was a young Parsi who sang and played the small harmonium. Soon, the strains of devotional music floated out on the tepid midday air. Interest slowly agglomerated in the peaceful atmosphere, and by ones and twos and threes, the Sahwasis drifted into the hall. Occasionally, all raised their voices in common acknowledgement of the greatness of God. More often, the melody and words were original to the player or even extemporized. A thin, graying individual with deep-set eyes slipped in. Sure. What's that, Khalid?
Yeah, I was just struggling a little. Needed help here. On page 38.
Sure.
On page 38, the second paragraph, the whole of creation, then the third paragraph and the fourth paragraph. Each of them, I feel there is some, what you call, there is something there, in this paragraph, 3 messages. I'm just struggling to get this. Can we reread this? And
sure.
See if we
can
get
reread
something.
It.
Yeah.
Can reread it. So, for the benefit of the others, maybe we can start right from the first para of 38 and go slowly. So,
Please.
Yeah, sure. And I start from the first para of 38. It is only when you wake up in the true sense, that is God realization, that you find that you alone, which is God, exist and that all else is nothing. Only after cycles and cycles of time can one attain one's own conscious state of God and find that one's infinite consciousness is eternally free of all illusion of duality. The whole of creation is a play of thoughts, the outcome of the mind. It is your own mind which binds you, and it is also the mind which is the means of your freedom. You are eternally free. You are not bound at all. I'll pause here, and then maybe we'll pause after every paragraph to make sure that we're getting this. Anybody wants to summarize this?
The emphasis here is on the mind.
Yes. And the mind being something that is required, but it's also the source of your eventual freedom, right? So we have been through this through analogous references to,
It is also that the mind is the source of bondage.
Yes. So you need the mind, and yet mind is what creates all the problems, right? And you need to use that itself to get rid of it, right? So that's, and I think analogously, we have heard in Baba's words of how it is like a scaffolding, and we'll have to live with it. We can't destroy it, or we can't ignore it. And at the right time, it outlives its utility. The right time is very far away for most of us, but I mean, at least I'm speaking for myself. But at that time, you basically move to the seventh plane and become one with God, right? That's what I can see here. Anybody else wants to help us? Sunil, Ravi?
Yeah, the previous, the first paragraph, what Karthik read is about God realization. Once you get God realization, you find that yourself to be infinite consciousness and everything what you had experienced. You never experienced. Whatever that was, it was just a dream in a dream. That was about the first paragraph. The second thing is the mind. Mind is nothing but sanskaras, right? Bunch of sanskaras. Those are the one which are coming in the way between you and the God. So we need to get rid of them. How do we get rid of them? We have no other choice than to use the same mind. Yeah. So we have to use certain aspects. Love is one of the aspects that Baba suggests to use it to get rid of the mind and to please the perfect master, so that if you are tuned with whatever needs to be in the spiritual world, when you become perfect, they will take you on. They will clear your sanskaras. They will clear your mind, and then you become one with the God. Yeah. Jai Baba.
So just read this paragraph very slowly. The whole of creation is a play of thoughts, the outcome of the mind. It is your mind which binds you, and it is also the mind which is the means of your freedom. You are eternally free. You are not bound at all. The whole of creation is a play of thoughts. Thoughts again related to the mind, the outcome of the mind. It is your own mind which binds you. And it is also the mind which is the means of your freedom. Here I'm struggling.
Yeah, God is in you, right? Khalid, God is in you. Do you identify with your mind, or do you identify with the God? That is the question. You always identify with the body and the mind. That's because of the sanskaras. And that is how everybody, we think, therefore we live. So all this creation is creation of our thoughts. And actually, you are actually eternally free, actually. But we don't know that. Only when we realize it, then we realize, oh, I have never been Khalid, I never been Ravi, whatever. It's just a dream. Just like how we go to sleep and dream and then wake up, oh, that was just a dream. I'm always Ravi, just like that.
As we go to the next paragraph.
College, you can think in these lines also. So all that exercise that we are doing here is by using our intellect primarily. And then our aim is to go beyond the intellect. So that is what is the passage says. So what you experience in illusion is a dream. That is a play of what is in your mind. But the same mind doing this exercise of learning and then going through the path of spirituality brings you to a plane where you will discard this mind. That's how we have to look at it, I think. Jai Baba.
Yes, the exercise that we are doing, and the routine that we are doing, trying to read Baba's words and internalize it in our being. So again, Baba in the second paragraph says, but you cannot realize your freedom by merely hearing this from me. That is when Baba is in physical form. Because today we are reading his words which have just been scripted. Because your mind contributes to entangle you in the illusion of duality. Therefore, you only understand what I am telling you. And mere understanding cannot make you experience the truth which I tell you. This is a googly to me. Anybody there?
Yeah.
So
I think,
the place
go ahead.
here I am telling you is a gross physical, say, appearance of Baba telling you in this Ahvas. But which I tell you is the eternal telling. that is by they realizing God. I tell you. So you have to make a difference between I am telling you and I tell you.
So Baba says like,
what
you
is
know,
that?
even
I'm not able to understand that clearly. I am telling you, but you cannot really and I tell you is different, is what you're saying?
Yes,
Therefore, you only understand what I am telling you, and mere understanding cannot make you experience the truth, which I tell you.
yes. So the truth is beyond the intellect. So that is difficult to understand for everyone unless they make an exercise. So what is happening in the Sahas is they are hearing what Baba is telling. But the understanding of the truth or the truth being realized is a different voice. That is, I tell you. That is the actual realization of God will clear that. Till that time, we don't understand that.
do we take it as like, you know, any words, any discourses being told to us or somebody or Baba telling to us is not so relevant, you know. The ultimate realization is a process.
Yeah.
And it will only come at a time when it has to. We conclude as that, Babaji?
Probably.
Okay.
I think that's a fair conclusion.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think what Baba is saying here is just by hearing from me will not give you that message that I am trying to give you. You have to make your own effort. And then when the time comes, you get that message actually.
Yeah.
Just developing an understanding, intellectual understanding is of no avail unless you go through the process and realize that truth actually. That's what I think I get it from this.
Yeah, if that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the case, and you
Yeah.
know, the process, you know, then
He's only giving you the way. This is the way you have to go, but you have to walk the way, right? You have to walk the path. You must let your mind be halted and finally rooted out. So what do we do to do that actually? That's our effort. That's our effort. Yeah.
The length of the path is defined. Yeah, we are being guided by Baba to, you know, how to navigate and negotiate the path. But the length of the path is it that, you know, the length is destined or defined?
See, length of the path will depend on the effort that you take, right? If you take minor efforts, it takes that longer, right? So for the truth, you must let your mind be halted and finally rooted out. Then as soon as you see me as I am really I am, everything else will disappear and you will find yourself to be your own internal and infinite self. So that's what the message is actually. So how to halt your mind? If you ask that question, then everything else evolves from that question actually. By remembering him more and more, loving him more and more, obeying him more and more, surrendering to him more and more. And then as we do that, everything else will evolve itself actually. Then as soon as you see me, that means once you tread the path that I am giving you and you will see me as I am really I am. And then all this intellectual understanding that you are trying to develop by listening to me will not be needed actually, because you will become the knowledge itself.
Yeah,
that's what. Yeah.
My struggle was like, you know, yes, when we are at the end of the path, we merge with Baba, we see Baba everywhere. Yes, Baba is me and me is Baba everywhere. But from the point of where I stand today, to the point where I accomplish that. I'm trying to, trying to grasp that, whether is that a process or whether it's just an academy where I have to pass through, whereby my personal ability will help me, or is it that the length is defined and I have to walk it irrespective of how I navigate or negotiate the path? That's where I'm struggling.
Yeah, I think for me, I would not even bother to look at that. How the path will be. I'll just start the journey, and as Baba takes me, what is in my control is my effort. I do that, and just leave it rest to him. Actually, that's what my take is. Actually, Jai Baba.
Yeah, that's what I think all of us are doing. I think the length answer or the length of what it takes is very subjective and personal, and I think it's also when that question is being asked, right? So if it's the first human birth, it's a long way away. Whereas if you've made a lot of births and you've been doing intelligent action, did not create too many sanskaras, then it may not be that long for you. So it's very personal. But yeah, I think we are guided and led by Baba, and we just have to go with the flow and not really think too much about it.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sorry for holding up everybody. So we can just proceed further.
Sure. I'm not able to hear you very clearly. So are you saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, his audio is not that great.
Yes.
Yeah, let us proceed with the reading.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Sure, no problem. So I'll continue from the paragraph here, which is in the middle. With this, Baba signified that it was time to halt for lunch. He instructed everyone to relax after the midday meal so that they might be refreshed for the afternoon. As he left the hall, Baba passed close to a thin, middle-aged man dressed in the loose ochre-colored robe worn by ascetics and known as a kafni. The unusual color caught his eye, and he seemed to think momentarily to penetrate through the robe to the man. "What is this? Why do you wear the kafni?" he asked. "I have put it on only for the occasion of the Sahwas program, Baba," was the reply. Baba speculated a moment, weighing the answer thoughtfully. "We have to give the shape and color of detachment to our hearts and not merely to the clothes we wear," he suggested gently and strode on through the door. Lunch had hardly been eaten before a few stray persons returned to the hall. Among them was a young Parsi who sang and played the small harmonium. Soon, the strains of devotional music floated out on the tepid midday air. Interest slowly agglomerated in the peaceful atmosphere, and by ones and twos and threes, the Sahavasis drifted into the hall. Occasionally, all raised their voices in common acknowledgement of the greatness of God. More often, the melody and words were original to the player or even extemporized. A thin, graying individual with deep-set eyes slipped in between the singer and the wall and picked up two small skin drums. Squatting, he placed one in front of his crossed legs and the other to his right. After a moment of flicking the surfaces to catch their tone and gently tapping of the wooden pegs on the sides, which held the tension tongs, he too joined the tribute to the mystery of creation. Often, the drumming would grow wild and insistent, caught in the double intensity of the complex rhythm and the rapidly moving emotion of the inner man flowing through the channel of his art. Then, Instantly, the crashing wave of feeling would be damped, and the listener was caught in the antiphony of soft gentleness and quiet devotion. Imperceptibly, the sound of bells, like those on a winter sleigh, began to blend with the voice of the singer and the reedy tones of the hand harmonium and the complex beat of the drums. A very old man with long white hair and beard, peering behind his great heavy lensed spectacles at nothing, had placed himself to the right of the sitting singer and was shaking a small set of bells bolted to a thin bar of steel. Even before the bells had been integrated, a fourth man joined the group. By common consent, he began a long devotional song on the greatness of the Master while the absorbed audience clapped. The performers were deeply engrossed in the moving strains and the alternately swelling and dying harmonies when Baba strode quietly into the room. At once, the singer looked up, breaking the flow of his song of praise. With a short gesture, Baba indicated that he should continue, and the melody began again while Baba clapped his hands in appreciative rhythm. Occasionally, Baba would raise his head and shake it slightly, breathing heavily as he did so, as if from the immensity of the feeling. When the hymn was over, the quartet took up an extemporization on Baba's toe. Even this small part of the Master's body was too much for the singer to encompass. It seemed that words, notes, and rhythmic beat must explode in the effort to translate the feeling of the soul. On and on it went, the drum and bell stopping periodically as the harmonium alone strove to accompany the singer in his pain. At times, the harmonium too was deserted as the voice soared on unaccompanied. When it seemed there was no way to drink in even one fraction of the infinite ocean of feeling inspired by the smallest toe of the Master, Baba called the song to a halt. Kohyar, he beckoned. Recite in your melodious voice the Banam e Yazdan in the name of God Almighty. As Kohyar's sonorous voice floated through the hall, Baba rose from his seat and folding his hands in front of him and with eyes almost closed, swayed slightly with the rhythm of the powerful prayer. When it was ended, Baba remained standing and then began to gesture. For ages past, I have been telling people to leave all and come to me. That alone is the way to liberation from all illusion. We always live in the present. From childhood to old age, we always live in the present. We forget the past because it is not there at all. There is always the eternal present. Even the great ones often fail to get a grip on eternity. At Hyderabad, there is a well-known saint. His following runs into thousands, but even he has yet to find out truth. जिसे पता लगा है, उसका पता किसी को नहीं लगता. None can know the one who has found God. Then Baba sat down. For a few moments, he preserved the characteristic pose of abstraction, which usually served as a punctuation mark as he transferred from one subject to another. Then he began to gesture again while Eruch continued the task of clothing the graceful motions with a garment of words. Hearing is not equal to understanding. Understanding is not equal to conception. Conception is not equal to perception. Perception is not equal to experience. Experience is not equal to becoming God realized. To realize God is to become God. This means consciously experiencing that you are God, for you are eternally God, but you do not know it. When God becomes man, avatar, He understands completely why you do not know that you are God, and he knows how you can become that. There can be nothing like a rigid set of rules to outline the means by which you may be led to the one and only path to God realization. This path lies through the subtle and mental spheres, which are independent of and above the gross sphere with its innumerable stars, suns, moons, and worlds, including the earth. The reference to an asterisk footnote for above. Okay, in reality, there's no above and no below. They're all illusion. Whatever brings you nearer to the path and suits you best is best for you, provided you are able to put it into practice wholeheartedly and in harmony with the natural bent of your mind. A good runner who remains indifferent to racing cannot make good progress, but a lame man who keeps on limping vigorously may soon arrive at the path. If it is not used properly, the best car is virtually useless to the traveler, however concerned he may be to arrive at his destination. I have already told you that love for God and obedience to a master are beyond the reach of man on his own, and that complete surrender is almost impossible for him. The next best thing then is for man to purify his heart. This is also very difficult because every action, whether trivial or important, good or bad, has left its impression on his mind. Thus, every human mind is a gigantic storehouse of accumulated and fast-changing impressions. How can one gain an adequate idea of these impressions left by innumerable actions, and particularly those born of anger, lust, and greed, during the lengthy course of the evolution of man's consciousness through the progressive stages of the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms of life? The obvious remedies for this situation are to use no remedies. For example, if one engages in a secluded life of mere physical renunciation, one is more likely to drive underground than eliminate the dirt of impressions from one's mind. Under a false sense of external security born of the secluded life, the mind is apt to become weakened and so stop struggling. Then, instead of achieving freedom from the bindings of impressions, the mind is likely to succumb eventually to its impressions and thus develop greater bindings. By becoming physically free of the bindings created by the impressions in your mind, you have not rooted them out of your mind. Although your body may be temporarily free as it is in the sound sleep state, yet your mind remains bound by the impressions. Even when the body itself is dropped, you do not become free, for your mind remains bound by the impressions which the mind has created. Even as the mind cannot be freed of bindings by mere physical renunciation, so the heart cannot be purified by mere mechanical following of the external forms and fads of religion. One must act on principles and not by rituals. For example, the essence of Zoroaster's teachings lies in the principles of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, and not in the multitude of rituals and ceremonies. These latter serve more as an escape from, rather than as an incentive to, the task of purifying the heart. In achieving good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, one finds that good is not just something better than bad, nor merely the opposite of bad, and not bad is not necessarily good. Good and bad are terms that reinforce illusory duality more than they remind one of divine unity. From the point of view of truth, thoughts, words, and deeds are good only when they are born of the longing for or the love of God, the one and only truth. Although born a Zoroastrian, all religions are the same to me insofar as they help men to come nearer and nearer to God, who is ever most near to man. It is better not to worship if your heart is not in it. Any prayer made mechanically in a spirit of show and or ceremony is all a farce. It results in greater binding through one's pretense to purity. Similarly, a self-imposed fast, if not observed through a sense of obedience or through love of truth, may make a clock the object of your fast through watching to see when it is time to stop. Such actions tighten more than they loosen the bindings of impressions. By not eating, you gather the impressions of not eating. Doing or not doing anything, whether sleeping, staying awake, or even breathing, creates impressions on your mind. Therefore, you may fast indefinitely, hang yourself upside down, or knock out your brains on a slab of stone, and yet not free your mind of its impressions. Why then should you necessarily give up eating, drinking, doing your duty to your wife and children, and looking after the welfare of others? Such duties do not obstruct your way to the path at all. What do come in your way are the bindings which you create unnecessarily for yourself through attachment to the objects connected with those duties. You can own the world without being attached to it, so long as you do not allow yourself to be owned by any part of it. Suppose, for instance, that a man, in spite of doing his best, loses his family and is unable to obtain enough to eat for himself. If he remains unconcerned, this amounts to his having really given up both his family and eating. There's an asterisk. The thought of being unconcerned at the loss of one's family is repugnant to many Western minds. However, this must be framed in the context of a viewpoint which is convinced that the soul does not die, that it only moves along to its next phase of learning, that it is hindered rather than helped by sorrow on the part of the living, and that activity within a detached frame of mind is one of the greatest achievements to which one can aspire. It's more for the Western reader. A real fast for the mind is to have no thoughts at all, but ordinarily this is impossible. Knowingly or unknowingly, like breathing, thoughts keep coming and going, whether you're dreaming the dream of your life or the dreams in your sleep. You become completely free of thoughts only when you are in the state of sound sleep, the most original beyond state of God. But in sound sleep, you also lose consciousness. Your mind is then temporarily at rest, but not freed of its impressions. Let us soon finish these discussions, lest some of you slip right into the most original state. The best way to cleanse the heart and prepare for the stilling of the mind is to lead a normal worldly life. Living in the midst of your day-to-day duties, responsibilities, likes, dislikes, etc. will help you. All these become the very means for the purification of your heart. This natural, normal method depends for its success upon a clear idea of the force behind your thoughts and the facts underlying your actions. The force behind your thoughts is the force of the impressions in your mind. The impressions are there due to your own previous actions. Actions are the cause of impressions, and thoughts are but the expressions of the impressions. This being true, the more you try to check your thoughts, the more you interfere with the natural process of their expression. Sooner or later, with the added force produced by suppression, the impressions are bound to express themselves completely. The truth of action is that every action, significant or insignificant, voluntary or involuntary, is at once impressed in turn upon your mind. Like a non-greasy stain, a light impression can be easily wiped out. But impressions caused by actions conceived in anger, lust, or greed are hard to remove. In short, actions produce impressions, and impressions produce thoughts. Thoughts, in turn, tend to precipitate further action. For the purification of your heart, leave your thoughts alone, but maintain a constant vigil over your actions. When you have thoughts of anger, lust, or greed, do not worry about them and do not try to check them. Let all such thoughts come and go without putting them into action. Try to think counter thoughts in order to discern, to discriminate, to learn, and above all, to unlearn the actions which are prompted by your own impressions. It is better to feel angry sometimes than merely to suppress anger. You then have an opportunity to think about anger, its causes, and its consequences. Although your mind may be angry, do not let your heart know it. Remain unaffected. If you never feel angry, you will be like stone, in which form the mind is least developed. Similarly, if you never have lusty thoughts, you cannot achieve the merit of having avoided lustful actions. Let the thoughts of anger, lust, and greed come and go freely and unasked without putting them into words and deeds. Then the related impressions in your mind begin to wear out and become less and less harmful. But when you put such thoughts into action, whether overtly or secretly, you develop new impressions worse than those which are spent in the act. These new impressions root even more firmly in your mind. The fire of divine love alone can destroy all impressions once and for all. However, remembering me can keep down the impurities in the impressions in your mind, as alum catches hold of flocculates, that is dirt in a vessel of turbid water. Therefore, when you feel angry or have lustful thoughts, remember Baba at once. Let my name serve as a net around you so that your thoughts, like mosquitoes, may keep buzzing around you and yet not sting you. In that manner, you can prevent unwanted thoughts from turning into unwanted actions, and thus eventually bring your heart to the purification required for me to manifest therein. But it is not child's play to remember me constantly during your moments of excitement. If, in spite of being very angry, you refrain from expressing anger, it is indeed a great achievement. It means that when your mind becomes angry, your heart does not know it, just as when your heart loves me, your mind need not know it. In fact, your mind does not know that your heart loves when prepared to give up life itself. You lead a life of day-to-day obedience and duty. You can also entrust your mind to me by remembering me or repeating my name in your heart as often as you can. Remember me so often that your mind is at a loss to find other thoughts to feed on. Although I am taking my own name continuously. I have come to hear it repeated by my lovers. And even though I were deaf, I would hear it if you repeated it only once with all your heart in it. If you cannot remember me constantly, then always take, that is, repeat, think of my name before going to sleep and on waking up. At least remember to remember me when you breathe your last, and you will still come to me. But how will you remember me at the last moment unless you start to remember me right now? Kammu Baba, whom many revere as a saint in Bombay, recently sent me word asking to be relieved of his duties and return unto me. I advised him also to take my name when breathing his last. In his last moments, Nauzer took my name, and so did my brother Jamshed and many others who have come to me. But it is only the heroes who come to me in their physical form. To these, death itself surrenders ultimately. With these words, Baba left off his gesticulations and gazed thoughtfully at the clock at the end of the hall. It was only 4:30, but it had been a long, full day with few interruptions in the flow of thought. Several times, in asides from the subject under discussion, he had given evidence of his impatience to be done with philosophizing. One sensed that his spirit raced behind the barrier of words, anxious to break through them and out into the untrammeled world of feeling. You have listened patiently today. I'm eager to have done with these words and to finish what we must say during this week of Sahwas. Then perhaps we can play games of marbles and listen to devotional music and do other things which are not as dreary as all this talking. So I have been anxious to finish these subjects which I have said in the sheet of instructions we might discuss during this week. Now you're tired from all this discoursing, and so I will leave you at 5 o'clock today. Spontaneously, a loud shout of no burst from the group. Very well, Baba smiled. I will respect your wishes. I will not go at 5 o'clock, but will depart from you now at 4:30. Despite their concern, the audience howled with laughter at Baba's chickenery. No, Baba, that's not what we meant. And you can't do that, Baba rose on every side. In the general merriment, Baba smiled and argued by gesture with several of the lead spokesmen. Finally, a good-humored compromise was worked out. 5:30 it was to be. Baba motioned to the four musicians, and at once the audience hushed as devotional music filled the hall. Once again, the rhythmic clapping of the audience kept time with the music, and the men swayed to the surges of feeling in the song. There was an air of high good humor after the meaty discourse, punctuated by the recent sharp burst of humor. By 5 o'clock, Baba was on his feet and off on a brief inspection of the kitchens and the sleeping quarters. Here and there, he would reach out for a brief scuffle with someone, much as a boy in his teens. A favorite trick was to raise his right arm high in a long, slow arc, then bring his hand crashing down into the grip of some grinning, tensed devotee. If the sting had not thrown the man completely off guard, a brief pushing and pulling ensued, in which both parties tried to throw the other off balance. Promptly at 5:30, Baba climbed into the blue car with the complement of Mandali, and they left for Mehrazad to spend the night. Avtar Meher Baba ki jai. But again, I think 2 pages back, there was a lot of serious and dense few paragraphs. And I think, like Mama ji said yesterday, a reread is what will help us uncover and internalize. But of course, many of those are thoughts that I've mentioned before, and it's more beautifully brought out here. And I was just thinking of that, especially on the chapters for intelligent action, action and inaction. This portion or this chapter is a good reference, because more than Deshmukh, it's actually Baba's words verbatim, right? So we can, in discourses, we finish action and inaction, and then actually come and read chapter 3 of Listen Humanity. At least those pages, it might be a very relevant reference. Any other thoughts? Mamaji, did you read yesterday? Do you have any more insights on chapter 2 or questions from there?
No, I couldn't read. And
Okay.
today, as per Khalid's question, how to go beyond mind using mind itself, is to take the name of Baba.
Yeah, to answer that question, correct.
Yeah.
Khalid, you got the answer.
Thank you, Mamaji.
Of course, I was again reminded that those paras about another reference from discourses, the provisional working ego, right? So again, it's basically use of the provisional working ego and involving Baba in everything. So it's amazing how this is all linking up now, and I think we should go back. I'll go back and update Trello with these references. Kama, anything you want to say and summarize chapter 3 as we wrap up?
Jai Baba. Actually, outside, hopefully, we won't hear any noise. But I think the question about how to love Baba, how to go beyond the mind is, you have to use the mind. You have to make the mind as your friend and make it into your slave. Make the mind feel as if it's your friend, but actually it should be made into a slave. Just like we are using our smartphone, as Baba said, evolution has created the mind. There was no mind when the whim happened, right? It's a progressive evolution. And so basically, the idea is that they say, use a thorn to remove a thorn. So similarly, we are using our mind to become mindless. Like Baba said, intense effort to become effortless. Similarly, the process is, this is all due to sanskaras, and as you rightly said, intelligent action. And as also mentioned that Baba said, when you have lost greed and anger, try to remember me. That mosquito net analogy is very appropriate. And also, how do you love Baba? Try to remember him. And there is a story with Krishna Nayak, and he told Baba about the schoolgirls in one of the places in Satara. But last time, Baba told him to repeat this mantra, Sachitanand, Paramanand, Meher Baba Vijnanand. So that is something we can also use. So it's all about constant remembering. Jai Baba.
Super. So with that, I think let's wrap up and catch up next week with chapter 4. Meanwhile, those of you rereading, re-listening to the chapters on 2 and 3, coming up with any insights or questions, please feel free to be vocal about it on the group so that we continue this journey. And I look forward to seeing all of you in the coming week. Have a great week ahead, and let's catch up again. Any other thoughts? No. So, Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Bye.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba, everyone. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.